Hi everyone, I'm John Ivison, your host on our weekly tour around the political hotspots. I'm joined as usual by Marcella Munro, who is the managing partner, owner-operator of WPM Public Affairs, and Andrew Balfour, who's the managing partner of Rubicon Strategies. And you've joined us on a pretty chilly spring afternoon. I'm not sure whether to blame Doug Ford or Justin Trudeau, but let's proceed. A busy week, dominated as usual by COVID, but we've got jurisdictions across the country that are making Brazil look like New Zealand. We've got we seem to be in the running for some kind of pathogen hospitality award by keeping our airspace open while importing lots of nasty new variants. And then we've had a budget which, to my eyes at least, means we're all going to be wheeling around worthless Canadian dollars in wheelbarrows just to pay for a cup of coffee within weeks or months. Do I exaggerate? How about we start with the budget? I mean, am I wrong that this is a cynical, irresponsible exercise in vote buying? Marcella, let's talk first of all about the policy involved and then maybe the politics.
Well, look, as your column on this issue was quite amusing, and I used a lot of big words that I haven't heard in a long time since I left university. The reality is, though, we're not there yet, and many people in this country are still in crisis. No one, I don't think, in your general Canadian population is going to complain about the level of spending. We've talked about it a couple times. I know both of you don't agree with this, but offering the provinces $30 billion over 5 years to build a national system of childcare is going to be very important to deal with the gendered outcomes of this pandemic. And I think the reality is right now that most premiers, even the conservative ones, are going to be hard-pressed to look that gift horse in the mouth. So I do think we're going to make some movement on childcare, and I'm not that worried about the fiscal framework. Because I think we're not that far off what the rest of our G7 economic partners are doing.
Yeah, I don't disagree with childcare.
No, I don't either.
And I don't think, people can go on and on about the amount of money being spent, and someone had to look past the pandemic. There's a lot of assumptions made in the forecasting that this assumes that we will be past COVID come Q3, Q4. But I think that there's also opportunity within that. Anytime you're going to go and spend that kind of money, if we're to believe all of the indicators and the numbers around childcare, it actually will increase the GDP. If you look at the money that's going to be spent on greening of the economy, if we can position ourselves as global leaders in green technology that we can export and make money off, there's actually significant financial returns that we could see off of spending $100 billion.
Right, but it was positioned as a growth budget, and while I think that the childcare thing is a good thing and we should be doing it, clearly it brings in. We saw in Quebec that it brought the female participation rate up in the labour force, but the growth prediction is 1.2% over 20 years. I mean, to position this as a growth budget is, to my mind, misleading. There were no choices made. We just, as I joked that when Justin Trudeau was faced with a choice between giving seniors $500 the month before an election and giving them an annual increase of about $1,000 a year, he chose to do both. That was the toughest choice he made.
Well, I think that's somewhat cynical, but
no more cynical than the budget, right, which, let's face it, is geared to winning the Liberals the next election. And Marcella, I'm a bit surprised that you're not upset with it from the point of view that it was clearly designed to crush the NDP.
Yeah, well, I still say they're doing everything that, first of all, Canadians want done right now. And I think what's politically going to be interesting is, they've made it very difficult for the NDP, but they've also made it very difficult for Conservatives because the paradigm has shifted from 20 years of sort of everyone being a deficit hawk to the state we're in now. And so if you're Aaron O'Toole and the Conservatives, what are you going to cut? Like, it's all well and good to complain about soaring deficits and debt, but when Canadians ask you what you're going to cut, you don't have a very good answer for them right now. This may be an easier conversation for them in a couple years, honestly.
there's another thing too that, and we've talked about this before, is other than the childcare, there was not any long-term programming. Like, we are able to, within 5 years, get back to a reasonable level of deficit. This isn't going to be successive, multi-$100 billion deficits.
Well, except for the fact that the day after the budget came out, the Prime Minister came out and said, yeah, we'll start talking to the provinces about expanding healthcare transfers, which is a multi-billion dollar. I mean, the provinces want $28 billion and an additional $4 every year. That is a multi-year, multi-decade commitment, and the Prime Minister apparently has already said, yeah, we'll do something on that. So all the assumptions, all the fiscal assumptions in that budget are pretty much null and void.
I think that all of these big things that are happening right now, what happened today with the new climate targets, what happened in the budget with childcare, and then what's happening with healthcare, I mean, it's going to be very difficult for the federal government to work in a collaborative way with all 10 premiers when some of the premiers' political fortunes are going to be made on just trying to destroy the federal government.
I just want to quickly say, though, I think most of the economists I listened to this week, even bank economists, et cetera, thought that probably the growth outlined in the budget was quite conservative. So I do think we may see more growth. But I also think, like all G7 countries, we're kind of throwing darts at the dartboard. And I don't think anyone really knows what the next couple of years hold.
Fair enough. So let's segue into the pandemic itself. We are recording this at 3 p.m. on Thursday. At 4 p.m., Bill Blair, the Public Safety Minister, is going to make an announcement on flights. We think on flights coming in from hotspots like India and perhaps even Brazil. We don't know what that announcement is going to be, but the indication is that there will be some kind of temporary suspension. It would be my contention, though, that we're really late to the party here, that flights have been coming in for weeks, clearly with COVID carrying passengers almost every day into Vancouver and Toronto from Delhi. And now new variants, importing in new variants, which obviously, as we see in India today, 315,000 new cases in one day is just horrific. Has the federal government been too late here, do you think, Marcella?
Well, I think they have. Premier Horgan's been sounding the alarm for several weeks, and then basically was told by the Prime Minister that, he should do what he thought was necessary. So, what's the Premier supposed to do about an airport? He can't shut down the airport. So he's instead limiting where people in British Columbia can travel outside their own community, which is preposterous because that's not going to do anything. So I think they are late. I don't know, I guess we'll see what they announce. But, to me, it doesn't make any sense except for the fact that we're relying on India right now for some of our COVID needs.
Do you think there's a linkage there, Andrew?
Well, I mean, there's no denying the fact that we get AstraZeneca from India. That's just a fact. And we would like more of it. And that's what is flying off the shelves across a lot of provinces for people over the age of 40 right now. I mean, both of you have your AstraZeneca. I'm still waiting. But I think that not to defend the government on this, obviously we don't want flights coming in that are full of COVID, but given that we have all these measures in place, from quarantine hotels to quarantines, I mean, maybe these measures we have aren't working, and that's something we should be looking at as well. Or maybe they're not being enforced properly. But if you come into Canada from abroad and you follow the quarantine rules and you're being monitored, I don't really understand how after 14 days you're out spreading these variants.
Well, that was one of the complaints from the premiers, Doug Ford and Francois Legault, who wrote to Justin Trudeau today, calling for flights to be suspended, but also that the existing rules be enforced at land borders and in quarantine hotels, which it doesn't seem to me that, there's been a lot of reports about people saying, well, I'm going to spend $2,000 on a quarantine hotel or $3,000 on a fine and I can go home. It doesn't seem to be working.
No, and just anecdotally, I know I have a couple of friends who shall not be named that returned after getting vaccinated in California, that returned to British Columbia, Alberta, and didn't bother with any of the things they were asked to do when they got there. So.
Wow. But I mean, further to that, we all recall like the Calgary Airport pilot project that led to like half the province of Alberta going away on a Christmas holiday, and then due to the misinterpretation, basically getting a COVID test, quarantining for 2 days, and then there's people are making up their own rules, and without strict enforcement, that's just being allowed to happen.
So finally, moving to the provincial level, I mean, we've got two provinces in particular, Alberta and Ontario, where the provincial governments seem to be on the back foot the whole time. I mean, Doug Ford coming out today virtually in tears, apologising for what his government has done or not done. What's going wrong in both of those provinces that the other places seem to have got right?
Well, I mean, to start off, I think that, while Jason Kenney couldn't send the requested healthcare workers from Alberta to Ontario because he has the highest COVID per capita rate in the country, he should send Doug Ford a muffin basket to thank him for keeping the attention away from the dumpster fire he has going on in his own province right now. The national media seems to only be paying attention to Ontario when things in Alberta are much worse.
Well, his own party, though, seem to be paying attention because some of them are now calling for his resignation.
Yeah, but that's because they don't want any restrictions.
Yeah, he's got a sort of different problem there. I mean, in terms of Doug Ford, I mean, what's gone right for that government in the last 2 weeks? His media conference today, which, they teased for 10 hours or something. They had the media all convinced they were about to make some big announcement. I think we were all expecting some version of paid sick leave because that's something that has been demanded now for weeks that the Ford government has refused to look at for almost a year. And instead what we got was a sort of teary apology, but still him maintaining that he has the best, smartest cabinet in the country, and saying that he talks to hundreds of doctors. So I just don't understand. They're so far off the rails right now. I've got to wonder if Premier Ford will be there for the campaign next year.
Well, that allows us to end on the note we came in on, blaming either Justin Trudeau or Doug Ford for the spread of COVID and the fact that we had snow in April. So anyway, let's end it there. Thank you again, and we'll speak again next week.
Thanks, Sean.
Cheers, guys.